Wednesday, April 1st. A couple of reminders as we get started in today's lesson. And today's going to be a very brief lesson in light of what you need to do is by tonight, I need to receive from you quiz number 20. Quiz number 20 is a single question. What were the causes of World War I? I need you to write at least 150 words. It's got to be creative in the sense that you made it. It can't be plagiarized. You can use your book. You can use other books. You can use the internet. You can use these videos. Whatever it takes, I'd like you to write at least 150 words. That can be handwritten and then submitted with the packet that your family is dropping off at the school sometime today. It can also be given as an email. You can send it to me. It's not a problem. I'm leaving formatting up to you. I'm trying to make things as simple and easy as possible for you guys. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. I haven't heard any questions from you so far, so I'm assuming that everyone is able to do this. If something happens and you are saying, hey, I'm unable to do this, you need to let me know as soon as possible so that we can make arrangements to get this done. Once again, we're going to pick up where we left off. This is going to be in now chapter 21. After chapter 21, this will involve sometime next week. I'll see how quickly we're able to get there. We're going to take a test and we're going to have our homework due. So please make sure that you are staying on top of this. I know there's other things to do. I'm doing my best to make this as quick and easy and painless as possible. All right, let's get into the material. We have been discussing the conclusion of World War I, and now we enter what's often called the interwar period. I'm sort of tipping my hand. If it's an interwar period, that means there was a war before and a war after. And I'm sure at this point you all know what we're building to, and that's World War II. The interwar period saw tremendous change in the humanities and social studies. So this did not just affect the politics. It didn't just affect people. It affected everything. World War I unleashed pessimism and destroyed respect for order. It was a strange sense. 1910 was an odd time in world history in many ways. 1910, there was a general feeling that everything was getting better and better and that it was always going to get better and better. In fact, in Christianity, there was this widespread belief in what was called postmillennialism, the idea that the church was going to help perfect the world so well that God would return, Jesus Christ would return, and he would find the world prepared for him. The kingdom had already been created. There was such optimism that science could conquer every problem, and that government would be just and wise and would lead people out of poverty and into... It was all just a bunch of garbage, and World War I demonstrated that because all the science and all the technology and all the new ways of thinking, and what was the result is mankind killed each other to an extent that had never been dreamed of before. And so after World War I, there's a strong sense of pessimism among those thoughtful people. We're going to see that the general population, they react in a different way, but still motivated by the same lessons of World War I. So the scientific changes we discussed back in chapter 18, this is the era in which new inventions, new thoughts, new technology. We already discussed that. So we're going to look at some of the other things. During this time, humans began to be treated like objects rather than subjects, and that's going to be a major issue. So let's introduce a new character. His name is Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was instrumental in the expansion of psychology and psychiatry. And you may ask, what's the difference between the two? I think technically speaking, psychology is the study of human behavior, and psychiatry is the treatment of mental deficiencies and breakdowns and flaws. So they're in many ways two sides of the same coin. I'm sure people who are engaged in it would give you an essay as to what makes them different, but there's a lot of similarities there. So Freud believes, as I mentioned earlier, Freud believes that people are objects rather than subjects. What's the difference there? You study them differently. You don't study objects the same way you study subjects. Objects are meant to be held and examined. They're meant to be dissected. Subjects, you don't do that with. Subjects you get to know. You have relationships with. So if I want to, or if, forget I want to, you've probably done this already, I think. If you want to know about a frog, you don't develop a relationship with the frog. You don't take the frog home and spend months, sharing your favorite YouTube videos and Snapchatting each other. That's not the way you get to know a frog. You want to know a frog? You put it to death and you dissect it. It's an object. It's a thing to be studied. But a subject is a thing to be related to. And people are subjects, and they can't be studied the same way. But Freud thought they could. Not that he was dissecting people. What he thought was that people behaved according to certain fixed, immutable laws. Essentially, there's no soul, there's no ghost in the machine. People can be studied and understood according to rules. The same rules, the laws of nature, the laws of gravity, the laws of thermodynamics. He thought there could be laws found for human behavior. Now, his actual ideas are universally rejected today. He was weird. And by weird, I mean perverse in a lot of ways, had some strange ideas. But he started a movement bigger than himself. And by the way, there's a bit of hypocrisy in the whole thing, is Freud's ideas are different than Pavlov's ideas, who are different than B.F. Skinner's ideas, who are different. Who determines who's right and who's wrong? Well, nobody's ever successfully answered that question, at least within the fields of psychology and psychiatry. In many ways, he was a natural continuation of the ideas of Darwin. What does Darwin say? Darwin says mankind is the latest and greatest evolution of the animals, and therefore man is an elevated animal. And if we study animals as objects, then why can't we do it with humans? So, you want to study a cow, you observe the cow. You set up your blind and pull out your telescope and you watch the cow and you document what it does. And you can do that with animals. Why? Because animals have no soul. Animals behave according to instinct. Why does a cow do what a cow does? Well, cows do what cows do because they're cows. God made them that way. They have certain needs that need to be fulfilled for food, for drink, for mating, and all things essentially happen in this. And dogs are the same way. As much as I love dogs, dogs are still dogs. But you say, well, my dog loves me. Well, yes, in its own doggish fashion. It sees you as the leader of the pack. It has a back that needs to be scratched. It still behaves according to the nature of dogs. It never rises above dogness. Your dog doesn't have a... You know what? We'll just stop right there. I don't want to ruin this for you. So if man is an elevated animal, he can study like an animal, and that meant that he can be examined. And so this is what the psychiatrists, psychologists try to do. So this meant for a search for instincts, for the underlying motivations beyond the soul. It was the search for the ghost in the machine. You no longer did evil because you were a sinful soul. You did evil because there was something in your subconscious, in your unconscious existence. There was maybe a parent who had wounded you. There was an idea that had been planted. There was a need that had not been met. Whatever it was, no longer were people free agents who did according to their own desires. Rather, everyone acted according to these fixed laws. And the search was just to find the laws. What made a person tick? And if I knew what made a person tick and there was something broken, we can potentially fix that, or at least offer therapy to compensate for it. Because that's all people are. People are simply just animals. And once you find the animal's need and satisfies the animal's need, it's fine. It's like getting into a cage with a lion. How do people do such a thing? Well, if the lion is completely well fed, if you just gave the lion as many cows as he could possibly eat, he's not going to eat you. Why? Because his needs have been met. And in the same way, there was a general feeling among psychologists, if we can find out what makes these people tick, what makes them hurt, then we can fix it and we know all about them and there'll be no problems. But the truth is, it just never worked that way. It still doesn't work that way. Darwin's ideas also, in addition to the fields of psychology and psychiatry, led to a lot of other things, and these are not related. Let me say the field of psychology does not lead to this next thing, eugenics. Eugenics was a desire to, in many ways, breed the perfect human. Eugenics was this attempt to eliminate everything undesirable from the genetic pool and to lead to better quality humans. Much in the same way that we breed dogs, we breed, like in a farm. They breed pigs to be big and fat. Why? Because we Americans like to eat big fat pigs. Bacon, all these things that, hey, you want the biggest bacon producers possible. Well, somebody thought, why not apply this? A lot of people thought, let's apply this to humanity. This meant during this time, very evil things happened in America and in Europe. A lot of people who A lot of people did things that are despicable and should be remembered for them, but they've been swept under history because it is so shameful. The United States of America, sometimes as forms of government and sometimes other people, this was a time in which there was the forced sterilization. That means they were surgically inhibited from being able to bear children of people who were some mentally retarded. It was very much targeted against those who were in prison and very much against those who were Black Americans and other minority groups. The beginning of the abortion industry, Margaret Sanger and others, largely existed because they were trying to eliminate what they considered undesirable populations. Well, who were undesirable populations? In their mind, there was Black Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, anyone who wasn't what they considered ideal. And that's where the abortion industry comes from even today, from this desire to destroy all that they considered inferior and to leave a pure master race, which sounds a whole lot like Hitler and Nazi Germany. And if you think that, you'd be correct. And a lot of very liberal thinkers of the era were very much pro-eugenesis. It's a disgusting moment in history, but it was during this time. This was during the interwar period. In philosophy, you have what was called existentialism became popular. It was, as a philosophy, and still continues to be, a fraudulent idea held by those who wish to appear wise without being wise. To be an existentialist is usually what you say to impress people at a party, and everyone just smiles because nobody knows what it means. Even those who claim to be existentialists often don't know what it means. The idea comes from existence precedes essence. So the early existentialists, whether you're talking about Sartre or Heidegger or Kierkegaard or all these people, they were essentially trying to find a foundation for a world of thought without God at all. So they came to this idea. You exist. Existence precedes essence. And so basically what that means is when you enter the world, you yourself, you impose all order upon it. You impose value, you impose truth, you impose beauty. You make the mental construct from which all the world exists, which the world makes sense. Because of this, the highest good is to be authentic, to essentially, you go through this period of existential angst. And if you don't understand this, don't worry, I'm not going to test you hard on this one. But just for your understanding, you go through this period of existential angst in which you try to determine what you want the world to be, and then you strive for authenticity, in which you achieve that you identified in the midst of your angst is right. So what does this mean? It means there's no such thing as truth, objective truth, because truth is something that you make for yourself. So your truth might be different than my truth, and they're different than everyone's truth. There's no such thing as goodness. Goodness is whatever you decided it to be. There's no such thing as beauty. Beauty is whatever you want it to be. So it's not internally consistent, because if there is no objective truth, that's a problem. Because just by saying there is no objective truth, what is that statement? It's an objective truth. So basically, you have one objective truth which says there can be no other objective truths, but that doesn't work. It's internally inconsistent. It has no place for value. Things like love, hope, joy, that can't exist. And it doesn't survive contact with the real world. And by this, I mean this. This is what I mean. So let's just say existentialism is real and I impose my own truth on the world. What if my truth says that every time I meet a new person, I must punch them in the nose? And I must be authentic, so that means I must punch you in the nose. Your truth probably doesn't include the idea that you must be punched in the nose. In fact, your truth may include something that I kick people who punch me in the nose. As you can see, if we all lived according to our own truth, what happens? Death and destruction. You can make the strong case that the terrorists of September 11th, 2001, they were just living out their own truth. They thought it was the right thing to do. And an existentialist would have to say, who are we to judge? Well, I'm not an existentialist, so I'll judge. That was evil, and they're bound for hell for the sins they committed. And there is objective truth, goodness, and beauty in the world. But existentialism doesn't hold to that. And like I said, a lot of people, I mean, in reality, the way to know if somebody is really an existentialist is, have they committed suicide yet? Because if they have not, then they're not really an existentialist. If they have, well then, hey, we can at least make the case. It's just a foolhardy philosophy held by people who are posers, who want to appear something that they're not. Okay, tomorrow we'll continue the interwar period and we'll pick up on art and literature, and then we'll move on to the politics and the developments of the era. So if you have any questions, contact me. We'll do the best we can to keep teaching during this time. Thanks.